today during today's webinar. And, truly, there's been a number of changes to our governance recently, including just last week, the passage of Bill 153, so the Building Infrastructure Safely Act, receiving royal assent. Now, while today it's important to focus on the 10-day advanced locates, we want to hear from you about what you'd like to learn about, what you'd like to learn more about, what future webinars could focus on, and if there are any additional areas that we can proactively shed some light on. So as Valentina just mentioned, please provide your feedback during the webinar by using the Q&A function, and Valentina will collect that information for us. And then after the webinar, you're always welcome to reach out to Ontario One Call. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay. Now, today we're sharing information with you about a regulation that comes into force on May 1st, 2024. Yes, that is the same day as the administrative penalty or AP regulation. Now, I have a slide coming up to discuss administrative penalties, but for today, let's focus on the changes to locate timelines brought about by this new regulation. So in the first column here, you'll see what come May 1st will be handled as an advanced locate request in compliance with regulatory changes. So the regulation facilitates a distinction between locates that must be done within 5 business days and those which must be completed within 10 business days. This regulation does not, though, change the time limit for emergency locate requests at 2 hours. So what does it all mean? Well, simply, as of May 1st, any request that is comprised of more than one civic address or request that where there's no civic address must be completed within 10 business days instead of 5. So this is a good time to point out that like 5-day locate requests, 10-day advanced locate requests can be renegotiated as long as the renegotiation happens in compliance with the Act. So following the existing protocol that exists in the Act, yes, 10-day advanced locates can be renegotiated. It's not a lot of wording for such a significant change in our sector. So later on in the webinar, we'll be sharing a number of examples and to put all these concepts sort of to the test and into context. So next, I'll invite Katie to join the webinar. Take it away, Katie.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. All right, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. So today I'm going to walk through at a high level some of the web portal changes that will be affecting those submitting the locate requests. Please be aware that today is not a training webinar, but we will have training material coming up over the next few weeks as our development within the web portal progresses. So please look out for that, and also some scenario-based information and situations that will help users understand better what's expected when using the system and selecting the right choices for locate requests. You can click to the next item. So one of the first and main changes within the web portal will be some detailed explanations and explanatory notes within the various components of the portal to help users understand which request should be selected at which point in time. So you'll see some descriptions over what a single address request is and what an advanced request is. And for the particular uses within our portal, an advanced request would be the one that would allocate 10 business days to complete a locate for infrastructure owners or their LSPs. You'll see this throughout, including some expectations for the different timeframes. Next one, please. There'll also be a default 10 business day work to begin date on the advanced request side. This is to ensure that LSPs and infrastructure owners have 10 business days to complete the locate. This timeframe starts when they receive the notification, meaning that if a locate request suspends for review by Ontario One Call, that clock does not start until it has left the Ontario One Call suspended queue and has all of the information corrected or updated as may be necessary. Next one, please. And finally, we're adding some map validations, in particular in the single address request. Because it's a request that facilitates fewer days to complete the locate, it's the 5-day turnaround time. We want to make sure that the requests coming into that format are not huge map selections that would drive the time to complete the locate, and that the system is being utilized appropriately within that section of the web portal. So I will share some scenarios with you in just a minute, but first Ryan's going to go over with you the difference between a dedicated locator and advanced locate.
Thanks very much for that, Katie. Yes, we thought we'd take a moment to summarize the difference between DL requests and advanced requests, advanced locate requests, bearing in mind the 10 business day obligation under both of these sections could potentially cause some confusion. So we want to get ahead of that today. So I'll start with reading the dedicated locator column. So the first column on the far left is, so what are designated dedicated locator projects? So designated broadband projects that commenced on or after April 14th, 2022. Why April 14th, 2022? That's because that is when changes to the One Call Act came into effect. There are also excavations or digs where a project owner decides to use DL or perhaps decides to transition to DL, as well as excavations or digs that satisfy criteria prescribed by the minister. Presently, there aren't any criteria prescribed by the minister, but should that change in the future, we'll make those adjustments accordingly. Now, 2 weeks ago, Ontario One Call hosted a dedicated locator town hall that included actually quite a lot of thoughtful conversation from a panel of Ontario One Call and industry experts. If you missed it, visit the Ontario One Call YouTube page. It's available for viewing at your convenience. You'll see advanced locate requests summarized in the second column. So again, here you'll see at least 2 properties or parts of properties, each having its own municipal address, or one or more projects or parts of properties. Pardon me, one or more properties or parts of properties, at least one of which has no municipal address. For the moment, I'd like to emphasize the difference. So it's important to note that projects that meet both the definition of an advanced request and a DL project must proceed as a dedicated locator project. So there's a lot of information that we've shared just in the first 10 minutes of this webinar, but we'll move now into the scenario questions or the scenario presentation. So back over to you, Katie.
Awesome. All right, so we'll go through a few scenarios today. By no means is this an exhaustive list, and we will be creating more as we go along and we get closer to the date of implementation of the changes to the system. But we wanted to raise a few now. So this is an example of what we would expect to be an advanced locate request submitted through that function. The reason this is an advanced locate request is because it meets the criteria of having both a municipal address or a single civic, but also crossing into the road and across the street into an adjacent property and into the boulevard of that property. So when an excavation would take place that would resemble this scenario, it would be considered an advanced locate request. Next. This would also fall under the advanced locate request option because you are looking to excavate on multiple civics, including a parking lot, as well as crossing the road into an intersecting street and into adjacent properties from the other side of the street. So this would fall under an advanced locate request. Next. One back. Thank you. And finally, this is an advanced locate request because it is happening in the traffic median in the middle of a road where no municipal address exists. And even though it's a smaller excavation, it meets the definition as per the regulations, and therefore it would fall under the advanced locate request option within the web portal. And our final example, I'm handing it over to Ryan for a little quiz.
Thanks, Katie. Yes, so we want to engage with the group. Our polling function is not working for us today, but we'll ask the question anyway. So, is this a single civic or advanced locate request? So, in this visual, you'll see that a homeowner has entered a request to dig in 2 separate parts of their own property. So, homeowner, a municipal address. So, is it a single civic or not? Well, you guessed it. Yes, it is a single civic request. So while there are 2 dig sites, both of these sites are contained within one single civic, which means it is a single civic locate and not an advanced request. Now, as promised, I wanted to bring up, I want to talk about administrative penalties during the webinar because I know that it's on a number of our stakeholders' minds. Now, I wouldn't ordinarily have an administrative penalty slide in a presentation like this, but given the timing that both of these regulations are coming into force in about 7 weeks from today on May 1st, we thought it was timely to add a slide to this presentation. So as you can see in this visual, the regulation prescribes a $300 penalty for underground infrastructure owners who don't get their locates done on time. Now, the penalty for a late standard locate request, so the 5 business day locate request, is actually the same as the penalty for the late advanced locate request at 10 business days. Now, where compliance isn't achieved, Ontario One Call's assessors may issue an additional or daily penalty of $300 for each day or part of a day that a locate is not complete, up to a maximum of $10,000. Now, to learn more about the AP regulation, join our webinar next week. It's on March 20th. If you scan the QR code at the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to register for that webinar. So let's take a minute to talk about our compliance approach on the next slide. Now, in this slide, we see how the compliance and industry performance team, my team, would approach a complaint regarding a single civic versus advanced locate request. This is just a mock scenario where a person, in this hypothetical scenario, a person has contacted the compliance and industry performance team here at Ontario One Call to allege an abuse of the locate system by an excavator. So let's start at the far left of the timeline here. So really like day 0, receiving an allegation. And in the next bullet, we see that the allegation that we've received is that in this mock scenario, that a user has entered a single civic rather than an advanced request. So our next step would be to file a complaints, file the complaint, which gives the excavator a chance, the user a chance to respond to us in writing, let us know what the circumstances were, and that response timeline also gives the user or excavator an opportunity to resolve the complaint. Now, bearing in mind that this is a mock scenario, we want to go through the entire breadth of our process. So let's say that in this scenario, the excavator's response was not satisfactory and there needed to be an escalation to an investigator. So that would happen in the next bullet, followed by the investigator reviewing the excavator's compliance history. I know that we talk about this a lot during compliance and industry performance webinars, but compliance history is important to us, and you'll hear more about that next week if you decide to join us for the AP webinar. Now, the investigator's next step would be to issue a notice of investigation and then conducting the investigation. And then the final bullet is sort of the outcome, the compliance outcome of the investigation. And there's always an outcome. Now, a reminder that that outcomes, even if it's a warning letter, that outcomes can be disciplinary or non-disciplinary in nature. Ontario One Call's dispute resolution framework is very comprehensive. There's a lot to it. So we devoted an entire webinar to that topic back in December, and that webinar is available on our Ontario One Call YouTube channel. You're welcome to view that to refresh your memory, perhaps even as a training aid. But as always, if you have any further questions or you'd like a one-on-one conversation with Ontario One Call, please reach out to us. We're always happy to do that. And finally, back over to Valentina.
Yes, thank you so much, Ryan and Katie. I am just going through some of the questions that we're getting, and thank you so much to everyone who's submitting them to us through the Q&A function. Okay, so let me just give me just 1 second. We're still having people joining, which is great. Okay, so first question that we are getting, can an advanced locate request be renegotiated?
Sure, I'll take that one. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here with you this afternoon. So an advanced request can be renegotiated exactly like a standard request. It's just beyond the 10 days rather than the 5. One thing that I would like to emphasize, within the compliance department, we've noticed that there are members who will renegotiate by sending an email to the excavator, but not getting a response back with an agreement. So I just want to emphasize that there has to be an agreement for it to be a valid renegotiation. So please keep that in mind when you're renegotiating. And it has to be in writing. Thank you.
Perfect. I'm getting a few questions to ask if we are recording the webinar. Some people have other engagements, of course. So yes, we are recording this. Just want to remind everybody that you will receive a recording of the webinar, and we will also post it on our YouTube channel and on the website. Okay. Is the administrative penalty for advanced locates the same as standard locates?
Yes, so the penalty for both categories of late locates, so the first category being sort of the single civic or the 5 business day locate category at $300 is the same as the penalty for the advanced locate request at 10 business days at $300. So when it comes to administrative penalties, there's a question, well, how does $300 become $10,000? So we will take a deep dive into that during next week's webinar, but the answer sort of in sweeping terms is daily penalties. So where a locate is late, an obligated party always has an opportunity to achieve compliance by getting the locate done. But where the locate is not complete, so talk about late locates, if the locate is not complete, then an assessor, yes, may be able to issue additional penalties of $300 a day for each day that the locate is not complete. Or part of a day that the locate is not complete, up to $10,000. So that's how you get from the $300 to possibly $10,000. But I would say that let me say in the same breath that we have seen a major improvement in performance over the last year. So our goal is to see improved performance overall.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. Will the new 10-day timeframe actually allow excavators to proceed at the start of business on the 10th day after notification?
Oh, thank you. So no, they have 10 days after the date that they're notified, the member. So they have until the end of the 10th business day to complete the locate, where then the excavator can begin excavation on the 11th day. If they're late, the excavator can submit a complaint to the compliance department through the complaint portal on our website, and we investigate all matters that are submitted.
Perfect. Thank you, Corey. We have a few operational questions. Will the requests from one call show the locate as advanced or standard?
The one that gives 10 business days locate completion time will show up as a project work in your confirmation. So when you're receiving your email, it will say project work as one of the statuses within the confirmation information, and it will also show project work as a status within the notification to the infrastructure owner or their LSP.
Okay, and can the ticket type advanced or standard be determined based on map selection?
It will be based on the selected option. There was a little bit of a screenshot showing that you can select either a single address request or an advanced request. But in the event that the criteria is not met for a single address request, the web portal will point the user to utilize the other option if that criteria is too large for the single address request.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Does the timeline show up on compliance feedback the 10 days, or does it still show 5 days?
Sorry, could you repeat that again, Valentina?
I think they're talking about 360 feedback, if the timeline shows us 10 days or still 5 days.
Are they, I think they're. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Corey.
Oh, sorry. I think that what they might be talking about is the performance reports, maybe, or when they pull the data from 360 or from the web portal, how it would fall in those buckets. So
I think so, yeah.
I think in that case, it'll show if it's an advanced request, or as Katie mentioned, if it shows up as like as project work, it would show as compliant under 0 to 10 days. And then the standard requests for single civic would be only compliant 0 to 5.
Okay, perfect. How will the advanced request information be transmitted to a member or LSP to identify it is an advanced request?
So again, the request will show up as a project work. So if you're utilizing a ticket management system or you're having your admin staff review the requests, please look out for that nomenclature on the request or on the notification.
Perfect. When do I have to relocate when my locate is expiring?
You will have to relocate a request that is an advanced request or a project work at least 10 business days in advance of it expiring, because that's how long it will be given to complete the new locate request, and at least 5 business days in advance of a standard request or a single address request.
Okay, we have a few about AP.
Sure.
The maximum of $10,000 is per day, month, or year?
Per contravention. So for each late locate could potentially be a $10,000 administrative penalty if the locate is not completed, which means so we'll use that language, a daily penalty, perhaps a stacking penalty, where where an assessor assesses a penalty, that penalty for a late locate would be $300, and then they may issue an additional $300 penalty per day or part of a day that the locate is not complete, up to $10,000. So really, the unit of measurement there is the locate itself. So we will go into more detail on that during next week's webinar. There's a lot there. While the legislation's clear, there is nuance about how the legislation is administered by us. So more information on that to come, but it's per locate.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ryan. And there are some questions about where do the money from APs go? What are we going to use them for?
Yeah, so the administrative penalty regulation and our governance, our legislation, the One Call Act, tells us what it is that we can use administrative penalties for. It cannot be used for staffing. It cannot be used for infrastructure here at Ontario One Call. But what it can be used for is administering the administrative penalty regulation itself. So that could be our policy or legal fees. It could be used for instance, bringing for educational purposes, and what the regulation tells us that we can use it for. But I have heard in some of our meetings with stakeholders that the concern is that administrative penalties are going to be used for operational purposes or for staffing here at Ontario One Call, and that's just not the case. We're quite restricted on how it is that we can use or how it is that we can use it, that money is collected through administrative penalties, which is frankly, I think, the correct thing to do, bearing in mind that the purpose of administrative penalties is, well, actually, there are 2 purposes. The first is to drive compliance, to promote compliance, and the other is to ensure that there is no economic benefit enjoyed by a party who's breaking the law.
Thank you, Ryan. And will the AP regulation be effective on May 1st?
Yes.
May 1st.
Yes, exactly. So May 1st, 2024, which is the same date that the regulation that is the subject of today's webinar will come into effect. So the advanced locates, both of these provisions come into force May 1st.
And who pays the penalty, the LSP or the utility owner?
So the person who is subject to the administrative penalty, so the person who is assessed the penalty, must pay the penalty. So in the case of late locates, it would be the underground infrastructure owners who would be responsible to pay the administrative penalty. Something that is a principle in regulation that's probably worth mentioning, if I to dig into the question a little bit more, is that no one can contract out their obligations or their they can contract out their obligations, but not their accountability under the Act. So while it's fair and reasonable to hire business entities or to subcontract functions, the person that we regulate under the Act is the infrastructure owner itself, as well as excavators.
Thank you, Ryan. Some utility pole locations do not have civil address. So would these locates push LDC's locates to 10 days?
In that circumstance, yes, unfortunately, it would push those types of requests into the advanced locate because it does not have a municipal address as stated in the regulation as a definition.
Thank you, Katie. Since the administrative penalties for large excavation locates and single address locates are the same, would that not provide an incentive to focus on simpler locates first and make the larger projects more likely to experience late locates?
So when we're applying the administrative penalty regulation, what's important is that the assessors have believe that there is a contravention that's occurred. So we are interested in the circumstances of each alleged contravention, but in terms of perhaps the motivation of a contravener, that's it's subjective. It's very difficult to say, but what I can say is that the work that we do here at Ontario One Call and the work that we do in the compliance team is guided by our code of conduct. So we'll make sure that we administer the legislation sort of in keeping with the spirit that the legislation is written. But it's also important that obligated parties do their part to stay compliant. So make sure that you're aware of what your obligations are.
Absolutely. How early can an advanced locate request be submitted without being placed in long-term suspension?
Anything submitted 11 days or earlier and ahead will be suspended in long-term suspense. So right now we're giving 10 business days for the locate to be completed. Therefore, it will go into the system and send as a notification at the 10 business days. So anything earlier than that is long-term suspend.
Thank you, Katie. We're getting some questions about DL. So I just want to remind everybody to please check our website on our DL page. You can find a lot of great information there, including processes, who's involved, how to proceed with a request, and including fees. So please visit our website at ontarioonecall.ca, and you will find at the top the DL web page, and you will find a lot of really good information there. You're always welcome to contact us as well if you have more questions specifically about DL. Okay, getting a lot of questions, which is absolutely great. Will fines be automated so that if Ontario One Call was not updated within a allotted time, we're issued a fine? So are we doing automatic fines?
So there are no automatic APs. Here's why. When the data that we collect through 360 is very important. It really gives us a province-wide perspective on compliance rates overall. However, when we see or an assessor views data in a spreadsheet, we can't say for certain whether that locate is or is not complete. Perhaps it's we're not sure if it's contravention that the locate's not complete or that 360 feedback is not complete, which is a separate contravention. And we're also not sure if there's been a renegotiation. So in administering the administrative penalty regulation, an assessor will be in compliance and verification mode. So taking a number of factors into consideration before determining whether to issue administrative penalty. So this is not something that we'll be automating, but the data itself is a trigger for compliance work. So it is important to stay compliant and to get locates done on time. But there is no automation in this process.
And just to piggyback off of that, so everything that I agree with everything Ryan said, but there is a contravention and an AP assigned to not updating 360 feedback. So please make sure that you are updating 360 feedback within 3 business days of completion of a locate. It is legislated and members are required to do so.
Absolutely, very important. Is there any discussion about allowing contractors to place locate requests more than 10 days in advance in order to help LSPs forecast workload and prepare accordingly?
There are a lot of conversations occurring on that subject. Although I don't have an update for you today, I think that it's something for you to look out for as we will be entertaining the idea. We understand the importance of having more insight into the activities within the province, and we'll be looking at that in the future.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. What if the advance locate ticket is not completed within 10 days? What happens next?
So if it's not complete within 10 days, they would have to submit a complaint through the Ontario One Call complaint portal, and then it'll be triaged by our great compliance administrators. And then eventually, if it's not resolved within the days allotted, which is 5 calendar days from the point that we issue the complaint, we will then escalate, and eventually it could go to an investigation. But and if we go all the way to the very end of the whole process, there could be different outcomes, which include APs. So yeah, so if it has not been completed within the 10 days, they can reach out to compliance, and we'll investigate further.
Thank you, Corey. I'm getting a few questions about the QR code in your previous slide, Ryan. Can you go back so then people can see it, and there's interested in registering for that webinar next week. So as Ryan mentioned, you can with your phone you can just scan the QR code, and you'll be able to register for next week administrative penalties webinar. We will also send reminders about this, and you'll receive the link to register when we send out the recording of the webinar. So you will have that in your email. If for some reason you don't receive it, feel free to check back on our website. We have a wonderful news section where we always post our events, our webinars, and the latest in the industry and in the regulatory space. So you will be able to find the link there as well. What happens when Allocator splits up the locates in 2 parts delivered at different dates when this was not agreed upon by the excavator?
So this is one of those scenarios that we would wish to discuss a specific fact scenario with an obligated party. So with a person asking the question. So if they have a case that they'd like to talk to, please reach out to Compliance Industry Performance. We can give advice and guidance, and if necessary, trigger a compliance response. But this is sort of one of those scenarios that we mentioned at the top of the webinar today, that we don't want to induce an error, and there is a chance that any difference in the fact scenario could alter the advice that we give. So difficult in a situation like this to give broad sweeping guidance. But listen, that's why we have our email and our telephone numbers. Please to reach out. And as Corey mentioned, 100% of the complaints that come into Ontario One Call, all of the calls that come into the CAPE team are responded to.
Which brings me to another question. Can we reach out to compliance regarding late locates this spring, even before the penalties start in May?
Yes, absolutely. So late locates are a live contravention. The administrative penalty is an outcome. It's a very important outcome. It will be an important tool after May 1st, but that doesn't change the fact that right now locates need to be done on time. And as I mentioned before, there has been quite an improvement compared to last year over the 12 months. So I know that members have been improving their performance not all, but by and large. And we do know that members have been increasing their capacity in order to get locates on time. So yes, don't wait for administrative penalties. It is a requirement now, and we are interested in addressing those now.
Absolutely. And will the penalties only be triggered by complaints for late tickets?
So we have 2 slides on this for next week, but what I'll say is not only complaints, but yes, the focus in year 1 will be complaints. We do have cases that can be triggered by data. We'll get into that a little bit more next week. But also bear in mind that we have a 2-year statute of limitations when it comes to administrative penalties from the time that an assessor becomes aware of the contravention. So we do have time to address potential APs even after the contravention has occurred, even after the locate has been completed. But the objective of the regulation is to drive compliance and to improve performance. So we are interested in complaints, but we do have a statute of limitations that gives us some space to do our function as well.
I'm getting a few questions to clarify that the 5-10 days we're talking about is calendar or business days. Is it calendar or business days?
It's business days, yes. Business.
Can an excavator submit 3 different single locate requests for 3 adjacent properties to avoid the 10-day locate?
That's really becomes, at the end of the day, a compliance matter depending on the scenario. And I think that what we'll be looking at is abuse of the system in that particular way. If we feel that an activity was occurring in one way before the regulations and it is being changed up and this specific contractor is utilizing it in such a way that would maybe bypass certain obligations, then we would look at that seriously to say that that might be a contravention really of the act. So it'll really depend on the situation, on the individuals, and on the way that it's being utilized.
Thank you, Katie.
That's exactly it. Like both Katie and Ryan mentioned, we can't really discuss scenarios or hypotheticals at the moment, but if anything that comes to the CAPE team, we will review it. It'll be triaged, and then we will address it accordingly.
I think we've hit a bit of a nerve here as well. It's a really good question, but I just like to sort of put the cherry on top before we move on to the next question. This is the kind of conduct that we are concerned about. So with the conduct of excavators and members, that matters. So where there is poor conduct, we're more likely to take compliance action. So be aware of that. It's important to do the right thing.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm seeing a lot of questions that are very specific and very much scenario based. So I just want to remind everyone to please contact compliance directly at compliance@ontarioonecall.ca to have a chat with them about your specific situation and your specific questions. They will be happy to walk you through and find the best advice for you. So please submit them through email. We have a wonderful team, dedicated team in compliance that will take the questions and get back to you as soon as possible. Can project owners contact compliance or is just excavators that can submit complaints?
So with respect to dedicated locator projects, yes, they can submit complaints depending on the type of contravention. So if, for example, a member and a project owner cannot agree on a dedicated locator, then the project owner can submit a complaint to compliance, and we'll check in with the dedicated locator team to gather more information and assess it from there. but they can definitely do so when it comes to DL.
Thank you, Corey. It was said at the start of the meeting that if a request is both an advance and a standard request, that it would be treated as a standard request, 5 days. Is this correct? Just hoping to get some more clarification on this and the reasoning
Sure.
behind it.
Yeah, so that was actually the table with the dedicated locator provisions, and something that we wanted to address proactively was the 10-day component, because there's a 10-day obligation under the DL provisions of our legislation, and now there's a 10-day obligation as well under advanced locates. So the advice that we gave was where a project meets the definition of both an advanced request and a dedicated locator project, it must proceed as a dedicated locator project. And that's because there's a whole framework around dedicated locator that that takes priority over other kinds of locate requests.
Thank you, Ryan. What would a subdivision being developed be classified as? It's only one civic address.
That would really depend on the geographic mapping that's available. So depends on how closely you could get to the single civic address. Most likely, however, because many of the new subdivisions are not well mapped, it would likely end up in the advanced locate request, as it's highly improbable that you're going to be able to get exactly the location that you're looking for in the map.
Thank you, Katie. What will happen to our current request that will now be deemed advanced? Do we need to resubmit all locates as new locates?
It would be anything going into the future. So once the portal is updated, any new requests that will be going through as an advanced request will have that timeline and time period associated to it. Anything submitted before would not qualify, as it would be previous to the regulation being enacted or enforced.
Thank you. Is there a limit on how many tickets can be submitted within a week?
That's a very sticky question. I think that it has to be legitimate locate requests with work being done within the 30-day period as specified in our act. So it's not that we're trying to create limits. It's really about being reasonable with your work. Are you actually completing the work within the time frame allotted? Is there really a need to submit that many in that time frame effectively?
Thank you so much, Katie. Some companies performing cable drop repairs or installing fiber will submit an individual locate for each address on a street instead of submitting it as a single locate. Will they now be required to use the advanced locate instead?
Let's qualify that as a very specific scenario and shoot that over to compliance as the email provided in the last slide, and we'll be happy to discuss that with you directly.
Will we be able to relocate past locates in the new system?
Yes, you'll be able to relocate a past locate, and it will just be dependent on the criteria of your locate, whether the infrastructure owner will now have 10 business days to complete that locate or 5 business days.
Thank you, Katie. We're getting through the end of the webinar. As I mentioned, I'm seeing a lot of scenario-based questions, which are all very valid. So just a reminder to please email us at compliance@ontarioonecall.ca. Ryan, can you please move the slide just so now the email is visible for everyone?
I'll also say, if it's okay, that you sending us your scenarios, it really is important. We're not trying to not give you answers here today. But we will also utilize those scenarios that you provide in the conversations we have to build our training material, to create our scenario-based information and business practices. So none of that is going to fall on deaf ears. So please do utilize this email address and utilize your options to be able to reach out to us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. We're getting some questions about getting the slides from this webinar besides the recording.
Yeah, I don't think we have any qualms with that, so we probably can make that happen.
Perfect. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, this is recorded, so you will be able to find the recording on the website and our YouTube channel. We will post the slides as well on the website as well. Okay. I think we're getting to a wrap. Ryan, Katie, Corey, any final remarks?
Well, just thank you very much for everybody who attended. We had a great turnout, and we hope that the message spreads far and wide, and keep communicating with us.
Thank you for, there are some tough questions here. I can see that this sector is not shy to ask a question. So yes, as Katie mentioned, please keep them coming. It helps us improve our work product, and it will ultimately drive compliance and safety too. So thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. So I think we will finalize the meeting there. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.